Hi, I'm Ash, and welcome or welcome back, whichever is applicable. My last video was about the D&D gods in Baldur's Gate 3, and I forgot some of them. So here's some more. Lathander is the neutral good god of dawn and renewal. He's generally depicted as like a really large himbo. Like if the blondest, bluest-eyed cutie was the size of the Eiffel Tower. Lathander is one of Faerun's oldest gods, but because of what he represents, he reflects many traits of youth. He's friendly, he's enthusiastic, he's optimistic about the future. Can't relate. He's like that person who works at Target for 12 years, shows up early to work every day, and says he's eager to help, but then won't even tell me the name of the drugs that he's on. Some people. Anyway, he's pretty popular because of these qualities, having one of the most attended and wealthiest churches in all of Faerun. Weirdly, despite his popularity, he was actually the central figure in what was called the Gods' War, otherwise known as the Dawn Cataclysm. This was an event that took place so long ago that it has basically no importance to mortals, didn't really affect them, and thus is pretty poorly documented. What we do know is that at some point in history, Lathander got fed up with all of the evil and stuff he was seeing. He didn't like it, and he thought that the only way to purge evil from the world would be to wipe it entirely clean. All of the planes, all of the gods, he would reshape them all in his image. Some of the deities at the time agreed with him, some did not. This led to a war amongst the gods, where some gods were killed, some were forever changed, and some other stuff happened, but we don't really know what it was. What we're left with is the pantheon that we have today. And I guess at some point, everyone forgave Lathander for being a reckless, sexy asshole. He and his followers are known for their altruism and for helping others and inspiring hope. They're also famous for their drip, usually donning vibrant, gaudy armor and robes splashed with pinks, reds, purples, and gold, reminiscent of a magnificent sunrise. Personally, I like Lathander. I think he's pretty fun, even though he did try to kill everybody that one time, but I can't really hold it against the guy for slaying in more than one way. Loviatar is another goddess who's mentioned in Baldur's Gate 3. She's the lawful evil goddess of torture and pain. She has a pretty decent following, probably comparable to her sworn enemy Ilmater, who I'll talk about next. Her portfolio of pain and suffering kind of falls under the jurisdiction of some other gods, so she spent most of her godhood serving other gods, namely Baal, Bane, and Shar at one point or another. Loviatar herself is an Ice Queen dominatrix with absolute immunity to emotional pain and a demand for physical pain. Her worshippers are skilled torturers, but they are also encouraged to be highly perceptive and empathetic, or at least be able to understand other people on a deep level so that they know exactly what will do the most physical and emotional harm. I think you get the picture. She's an S&M baddie of the gods. What would we do without one? Now, Ilmater, on the other hand, is the lawful good god of perseverance through suffering. While Loviatar inflicts and encourages pain and suffering, Ilmater willingly suffers for the purpose of sparing others from it. His worshippers include the sick, the poor, anyone who has suffered in their life can and does turn to Ilmater, and Ilmater turned no one away, regardless of alignment or status, for he was devoted to bearing the pain of the world, believing and hoping that any and all evil could be turned toward good. Much more wholesome and markedly less sexy than the other gods we've talked about so far. Ilmater had an important relationship with some other gods, and luckily those gods happen to also be mentioned in Baldur's Gate 3, so we'll go over them too a little bit. But anyway, these gods are Tyr, the god of justice, Torm, the god of duty, and Bahamut, the dragon god of justice. Yes, dragons have different gods than humanoids. Back before any of the really bad stuff happened, in a time before these gods that I've mentioned were not yet fully gods, but were still very powerful beings just beginning to amass the followers required to ascend to godhood. They were doing their thing while mortals, on the other hand, were wreaking havoc on the planet. At the time, there was a massive conflict between an evil empire of humans and some elves that ended with the elven high priests raising a huge tidal wave and wiping out most of the human empire. What was left of the human empire after the devastation was just desolate, and the people there resorted to banditry and chaos, and it was just a mess. And Tyr didn't like this very much at the time, and he decided he was going to have a crusade. He stormed in with an army of 200 Celestials and decided he was going to clean up the place, and he did. Ilmater was, I guess, nearby, and he saw what Tyr was doing and agreed with him, and he actually joined him and helped him to curb the evil and the chaos that was happening here, and this would be known as the Procession of Justice. Sometime after the Procession of Justice ended, the then demigod Torm allied with Tyr and Ilmater, and they became the Jonas Brothers. No, wait, not that. They were called the Triad, and they all got together and decided that they were such good friends that they would make perfect roommates. And thus, their shared plane called the House of the Triad was born. Sometime after the House of the Triad was formed, a bunch of demons attacked them, and that's the only place where the dragon god of justice Bahamut comes into play, because he helped them drive the demons out of their home plane. But anyway, having their own plane together was pretty cool at first. You know, they hung out, they played Call of Duty together, they threw awesome parties, but then, you know, things got not so great, as they often do in situations like this. Maybe there was a big mountain of plates turning moldy in the sink that no one would claim, or maybe Ilmater parked behind Torm's car one night and forgot to move it before he had to go to work in the morning, or maybe Tyr was tricked into killing Helm, the god of guardians, by the evil god Cyric over a misunderstanding. Who really knows what the final straw was? Whatever the cause, Ilmater was the first to officially break up the band. He decided he was going to go live with a hot girl when he moved out of the House of the Triad and went to live with the goddess of beauty soon. Tyr, realizing that it would be pretty awkward to stick around after being tricked by a dork like Cyric, being abandoned by his best bud, and after literally killing a guy for no reason, he decided to move to the Bahamas, and he gave up his godhood and gave it to Torm. But Bahamut, the dragon god of justice, was the one to be the ultimate god of justice from that point on. And yeah, wow. Anyway, that's their whole story. Silvanus is the neutral god of wild nature. He cherishes and protects all land unspoiled by civilization. He's responsible for keeping the balance between fire and ice, growth and decay, but has absolutely no interest in the balance between civilization and nature. He abhors civilization and anything that encroaches on wild nature. Honestly, Silvanus is pretty simple. He doesn't have many allies or enemies because he kind of keeps to himself and just hangs out in the woods. He's always present, but he doesn't interfere with or even usually notice the things that the other gods, or especially not mortals, do, unless it endangers nature. Most druids and some clerics worship Silvanus, but anyone can worship him. He's neutral, and he doesn't give a shit if you worship him or not, which makes worshiping him extra cool. Or extra pointless. You can decide. Finally, I want to talk about two names that we know in relation to the Githyanki race, which are Vlaakith and Gith. Now, if you want to hear more about Githyanki, the race, you're gonna have to go to my other video about the races that I made. But here, we're just talking about the lady, Gith. And I must reiterate that she actually was just a lady. Gith is not a goddess. She was a mind flayer's slave alongside the rest of her people for many centuries. The only really notable thing about her was that she possessed a unique mutation that interfered with the hive mind of elder brains, which I assume helped her disrupt them when she eventually would go on to lead the revolt of her people against the mind flayers and free them of their slavery. Gith led the largest collective rebellion against the mind flayers, and she and her people basically nearly erased the Illithid Empire from existence. They have not recovered from Gith's rebellion and to this day. Gith ruled as the leader of this newly realized race of people, the Githyanki, for many years, and around this time was when Vlaakith I came into the picture. She was actually Gith's advisor, and one of her duties was to collect more allies to fight with them against the Mind Flayers. And for whatever reason, Vlaakith I sought allies in the Hells. Vlaakith I was able to convince Gith to come with her to the Nine Hells, where they were going to try to make a deal with the evil queen of chromatic dragons, Tiamat, and they were able to convince her. The deal was that the Githyanki people would be granted red dragons to ride into battle against the Mind Flayers as long as Gith remained in hell with Tiamat, who I guess was extremely fucking bored or lonely. I just picture them sitting together on an on-fire couch watching QVC at 3 in the afternoon, completely sick of each other, but just too comfortable with the situation to change it. Anyway, the deal sounded pretty good to them, but Vlaakith pretty much betrayed Gith. She bailed on her, forcing Gith to have to negotiate with Tiamat for the sake of all of her people alone. Knowing this would end poorly for Gith, Vlaakith was able to seize power over the Githyanki people while making it seem like she was doing them a huge favor. Gith agreed to the deal because she wanted to ensure the continued freedom of her people, and Vlaakith could return home and hit them with the bad news about Gith's death, then follow up with the extremely good news that they now had red dragons to ride into battle, and kind of just sprinkle in the fact that she would now be taking over as their leader. She shared with them what she claimed to be Gith's final decree, which was basically just like continue the good fight type thing. Whether or not Gith actually said that is up for debate, but I guess no one really asked any questions. Now, Vlaakith 1 was not the only Vlaakith, obviously, as there's the one after her name, and actually every leader of the Githyanki since Vlaakith 1 has been called Vlaakith. The current Vlaakith is Vlaakith 157, and can I please never say Vlaakith again? Well, no, I can't, because I have to point out that Vlaakith 157 is actually a kind of a special Vlaakith, because Vlaakith 157 is a lich. The fun thing about liches is that they cannot die. Well, they can, but they have a thing called a phylactery that allows them to basically just respawn anytime their body is damaged beyond repair. It's very, very difficult to kill a lich because their phylactery is always, always, always very well hidden, very well guarded, pretty much impossible to find and destroy. Thus, Vlaakith 157 clearly intends to rule the Githyanki forever. In the game, she's kind of presented as a god, and she's well on her way for sure. She isn't quite yet a deity, but she is making good progress toward that, which is her ultimate goal. She's just got some pesky detractors or some Orpheus holdouts to deal with. Oh, and speaking of Orpheus, there's Orpheus. I'm actually not going to go over his story because all of his story was invented for Baldur's Gate 3. All of it's in there. You probably already know it if you've played the game. If not, you will. I might go over him in a future video if there is interest, but I don't really give two shits. But yeah, so those are the deities that I did want to talk about that I forgot to talk about in the other video, and as embarrassing as it would be for me to have to end up making a third video about deities in Baldur's Gate 3, I know that this is not all of them, but these are the ones that I personally felt were the most important. I know, I'm sorry if your favorite god or goddess wasn't listed, but you know, I don't know, blame Larian. And yeah, thank you for watching my video. Please leave a like if you did like it, if you learned something new. And definitely leave a comment if there's something else about Baldur's Gate 3 you want me to go over. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.